Hola, buenas noches. Gracias por la paciencia y a todos y todas por estar acá. Vamos a empezar con la actividad de hoy. Somos muchos hoy en el aula, parado ayer y antes de ayer, así que voy a repetir algunos anuncios para los que estuvieron viniendo. Hoy estamos terminando una semana muy especial en la escuela, una semana intensa, el último día del taller de invierno, originalmente planificado para mañana, pero bueno, temas de River tuvimos que correr y cerrar todo hoy. Este taller estuvo dictado por Padmanabhan, del estudio Lütjens Padmanabhan, junto a Meili Peter y Josefina, quienes estuvieron contándonos un poco de su trabajo ayer y antes de ayer. Para quienes no han estado, todas estas conferencias van a estar disponibles en el canal de YouTube de la Escuela y del SEAC. La idea de hoy es terminar esta semana conociendo un poco más sobre el trabajo de Thomas con una conferencia magistral y que luego podamos ir al taller de arquitectura en este mismo piso, el edificio Alcorta, a ver la exhibición de los trabajos realizados por los estudiantes esta semana y a brindar todos juntos. Hoy también, o esta semana, damos inicio a las actividades del segundo semestre en el SEAC. Como les conté un poco el miércoles cuando presentaba a Cedil, este semestre vamos a tener el privilegio de tener una gran cantidad de conferencias magistrales de invitados internacionales. Desde el SEAC nos parece muy importante construir un espacio para la presentación, la discusión y el diálogo de prácticas que seleccionamos y que curamos y que nos parecen relevantes del panorama internacional. Nos sentimos muy privilegiados de poder funcionar de esa manera y de tener colegas y amistades que se interesen en esta plataforma para poder hablar. En ese sentido, hace un poco de ruido, pero sin hacerlo demasiado. En ese sentido, vamos a recibir a X de productora, a Kirsten Gers de la oficina Office, a Felipe Navidades de Fala, a Pier Paolo Tamburelli y Giacomo Suma de la oficina italiana Baucu, y a Luis Rojo la semana próxima. Este ciclo de conferencias magistrales, como les decía, nos parece que es una selección de prácticas relevantes de las cuales queremos conocer más, con las cuales queremos debatir, a las cuales queremos mostrarle la escuela, la editorial y que esto funcione un poco como esa plataforma de intercambio. Este semestre también vamos a realizar la segunda exhibición del año, titulada Recuerdos del Futuro, y que va a salir de la mano del segundo número de la revista ETH Arquitectura, dedicado a Arquitectura Argentina de 1970. Esta exhibición y número de la revista están curados por Sabine Kastner y Gonzalo Yerba y estarán dedicados a una selección de más de 10 proyectos de arquitectura argentina de esa década. Estamos muy contentos de realizar esta iniciativa. Un poco la idea de aunar la exhibición con el lanzamiento del número es por la gran cantidad de material alucinante que apareció en la investigación que llevaron adelante los chicos, que no pudo ser todo incluida en una revista. Así que creo que esperamos con mucho entusiasmo que llegue septiembre. Bueno, y ahora, antes de ceder la palabra a Thomas, me gustaría invitarla a Josefina Sposito, profesora de la escuela, para que dé unas palabras sobre su trabajo y lo introduzca formalmente. Gracias.
Hola a todos. Bueno, qué bueno ver tanta gente acá para celebrar el trabajo de Thomas después de una semana de muchísima actividad en el taller. Voy a switchar en inglés rápido. I'm truly honored and delighted to introduce today's lecture by Padmanabhan from the practice Lütjens Padmanabhan, one of the most stimulating and interesting offices in the contemporary architectural scene. Oliver and Thomas founded their practice in 2007 in Zurich, and from the very beginning, they managed to solidly sustain the practice of architecture alongside academic endeavors. Oliver studied at the ETH Zúrich and EPF Lausanne, while Thomas studied at Aachen University of Technology, La Sapienza in Rome, and Cornell University in the US. Both have taught at ETH Zúrich, the Technical University of Munich, EPF Lausanne, and the Harvard Graduate School of Design, among other academic institutions. But before founding their practice, Thomas worked at SOM, Meili Peter, and Diener Diener, where he crossed paths with Oliver Lütjens. So Oliver and Thomas belong to a new generation of space studios that do not focus on the essence of materials or creating monolithic pure volumes. Instead, they understand architecture as a composite figure, multiple, diverse, ambiguous. They choose surface rather than mass. They explore layers. They dive into history and their experiences to shape the language of the present. Their work is playful, affordable, or better said, approachable, sharp, but at the same time fragile and sensitive. It is overall extremely theatrical. Their buildings are light-weighted, made out of parts and surface. They have joints, overlaps, textures. They are built piece by piece like a large-scale model. A few weeks ago, I had the opportunity to visit their studio in Zurich, and entering the office, the first thing I saw were models. Models everywhere, on tables, amid computers, between chairs, large windows, everywhere. Models are an active presence within the workspace. Models at a 1 to 50 scale, like the ones we made in the workshop during these past few days. A scale that is neither too big nor too small, large enough to build the main ideas of the project, but small enough to allow only partial definitions. Their models trigger conversations, and their openness bring out different ideas and interpretations. Everyone can approach them in search of whatever they want to find. Models are the office's language of form. I'm a great admirer of Thomas and Oliver's work, so after an entire week developing and discussing ideas through models at the winter workshop, today we're finally here, eager to hear Thomas describe their work and tell us about those thin and not so thin layers that make up their body of ideas. And for the one who participated in the workshop, remember, gluing is committing. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Josefina, for these kind words. They put me under so much pressure. No? Thank you also for inviting me to this wonderful workshop, inviting us, Jacob, Celine. Thank you, Marcelo. Thank you, Javier, for this wonderful week before starting with the lecture. Marcelo, you just said something very interesting when we were sitting down here in the hall. You said it's great to do a lecture at the end of the week when you know everybody, you know who you're speaking to. And I really feel I know who I'm speaking to now. Dear colleagues, dear students, and dear friends, there was really a moment of dialogue. So I'd like to see this as a continuation of our conversation. We stopped like half an hour ago down the corridor.
Going to dim the lights.
Oh yeah, if you could, yeah, sure, that would be good.
Trying to get this one. If not, you can use the mouse. Yeah. Sure. I'll do it. Yeah.
We love the city. We love the streets, squares, facades, and rich, complex interiors. We love history, continuity, and time in architecture. We love architecture. For us, architecture is a language of form. However, today, we feel the urgent need for a fundamental ecological, social, and economic transformation. How can architecture contribute to this change? And as a result, what is the role of form? This question is central to our work. Josefina, thank you for introducing the notion of composite figure, which is the title of this lecture. We want to take you through 4 projects that show the trajectory of our work and where we can discuss some of the ideas that have informed our work over the last almost 15 years. And the first project that I want to talk about is an urban housing project in the Herrenstraße in Zurich. So I'm showing you the main facade right from the beginning without showing anything else. So look at the facade and what kind of facade is this? What is this building looking at? No? I want to know from you in the audience. No? What is opposite this building? Is it a friendly place? Is it a serious face? What is it? What is it facing? No? What is it looking at? Do you have any guess? Those who haven't looked into the internet?
There's a tree in the reflection.
There's a tree in the reflection, but I can tell you, I can help you. The building is facing two of the icons of the modern city, the slaughterhouse and the soccer stadium. So this is what informed this building. As you can see in the plan, it's really, we thought of this building as being the last building of Zurich. You can see the city center is below, and then you can see the block structure of the 19th century continuing here and then ending here in a very strange situation. So literally, when you look beyond the building, you look into the Limmat Valley, the valley of the small river that runs through Zurich, and you can see, you look into that sprawl where you have IKEA and big shops and the Autobahn and railways and so on. So it's really the end of the city as we know it in this point. And on one side, there is, as I said, the openness of the sprawl of the city, and on the other side, there are these allotment gardens. You know, we have these little gardens that you can rent inside the city where you can grow tomatoes and do a barbecue and hang out on the weekend. So it's really a very contrasted urban situation. And on the top, you can see the edge of the slaughterhouse and the curve of the stadium at the corner, the left corner. So the design of this apartment building, the section of this apartment building, reflects exactly that urban situation. From one hand, the bay window of the upper stories is pushing into that open space of the Limmat Valley. And on the other hand, on the lower levels, the building is pulling back into the green space of the allotment gardens. So the section of the building reflects our understanding of the site. It is a building that is conceived as a traditional urban building with a front facade like a face and a back facade. The front facade is composed of a bay window that's almost closed, almost like a mask. It is inspired by 2 cousins and friends. And now you can see what we did with it, right? You've been through this for a few days. The cousins and friends are on the left. It's the Immeuble Porte Molitor by Le Corbusier, the building also across the soccer stadium in Paris, where Le Corbusier lived on the rooftop apartment. It's a building where Corbusier developed his language of steel frames that are filled with elements. It's a very urban, it's a very modern building. At the same time, it's very urban. You can see that all the traditional elements of a base, of a complex relationship, a complex development of different stages that a traditional urban building has, can also be seen. The other example, the other cousin, is Alberti's Palazzo Rucellai, one of the iconic Renaissance palaces in Florence. There you see something really crazy. As opposed to all other Renaissance palaces, this one is not making a decision over the choice whether it would deal with lintels and pillars on one hand, or whether it wants to deal with wall, where windows are punched out of or cut out of this wall. No, actually, it does both at the same time. So both fundamental systems of Western architecture, the idea of the wall and the idea of the structure composed of verticals, for example, pillars or columns, and horizontals, are both coexisting at the same time, and more of them, they're actually flattened into the same plane, so you don't really know which one is supporting what. This ambiguity was really fascinating for us. So we thought that as opposed to a marriage or to a meeting of cousins and friends, we thought that these two buildings could create an interstitial space, a space in between them, in which this project could be created. So actually, what you see is an utterly modern building with band windows and a series of bands that have a relief out of thin fiber cement plates. And then there are pieces of metal windows, metal entrances, car entrances, and all the elements. They are all distinct, and every element speaks for itself, but in a monochromatic way, in the end, they come together all in the same plane. The backside is very different. And these are 1:50 models. They're exactly the same scale that you're using. And the backside is very different. In the backside, the law allowed us to do a 2-story building that you put into the garden, but which is a difficult thing because you design a nice building and suddenly you realize you can do this thing that knows, sticking with the garden, and it's really ugly. So how do you link these two? So we understood this as a position where you could actually divide this facade with a joint in two and build something like what do you call it? Where you have false hair, like a wig, on top, and that would extend the height of this, so it would connect better to the main building. But you see, it's a very simple render facade. So what do you do with interior space if you have two facades that are so fundamentally different? How do you understand the relationship between inside and outside? Shouldn't the facade not be more than just a mask? Shouldn't it be somehow meaningful? So inside, it's a plan that we think works like the human body. The human body is symmetrical, but the organs are actually not quite symmetrical. The liver and the heart, but the organs are balanced out in a symmetrical manner. So here you can see that there's a central staircase, and there are 2 apartments on 2 sides of the staircase, but they are not completely symmetrical. While you have a sequence of a bedroom with a bathroom here on both sides and a kind of wardrobe space, symmetrically, here in the middle, you realize that the bedrooms are actually put in series. So while this is mirrored, this part is actually an A-B sequence. So why is this so? The reason why this is that this building is not, fantastic. This building is not north-south oriented, but east-west oriented. So the light comes from this side here. So here, from this side, the light can bounce into the space against this wall and be reflected back. While this other side, the right side, is in the shade, and you get indirect light that should run clearly all the way through that very deep space. So what are the other elements of the plan? The other elements are pillars. And the pillars are, of course, they are made from concrete and they hold up the roof, split, but also they are made in a way, they have a diagonal, they have a direction. The pillars against the facade that's facing the hostile environment of the slaughterhouse and the soccer stadium are put parallel to the facade. So they somehow create a second layer of protection and another space, an enfilade along the facade. While in the depth of the space, suddenly the pillars, they're turned by 90 degrees and lead into the depth of the space. So in a way, and between the layers, you can see walls spanning. So if you remember from your first year, the 5 points of architecture of Le Corbusier, where he's trying to, I'm not sure it's in it, but it's a long time ago, but where he distinguishes between pillars and non-load-bearing walls, where there's this interplay of independent systems. Here, there is actually a dependency. So the walls are actually attached to the pillars, while they are also non-load-bearing. They're like membranes between the pillars. So what you can see when you experience the plan, that you, for example, you enter in this apartment here, and when you use it during the day, you leave all these doors open along the facade, here into the bedroom, and also here. So it becomes what Corbusier calls a plan libre, an open plan. You can float around. There's a floating sense of space. While at night, by closing the doors, it transforms itself into a cellular plan, like a more traditional sense of enclosure. Oh, this is the example of Le Corbusier's Villa Stein, where you can actually see that relationship between a series of orderly pillars and then a very free relationship of the different non-load-bearing wall in relationship to these pillars. I'll show you a few pictures from inside. And these are pictures by the Swiss photographer Walter Meyer. This is upon entering the apartment. It has for Swiss apartments quite high. We were allowed to do a higher floor to ceiling heights, because the zoning law allowed us quite a high building, but not many floors. So there was this advantage, and of course you can understand that the deep plan, the depth of the plan and the apartment was really good. Could be compensated by that height. So the pillars are very active, and then the doors are made in a way that sometimes you don't see where the window ends. So the idea is to have an overlay between the band windows inside that are seemingly endless and the verticals that are somehow limited. So there's a kind of a scenographic idea of limitless space that is also implied. That is implied by the doors that are hidden behind these corners. This is the enfilade along the facade, going from the living room, kitchen into the bedroom and the bathroom. And this is the bathroom. Here you can see that the bathroom was full of pipes and stuff. And instead of clarifying it and making it clearer, we decided to use any opportunity of a setback and of a form and a kind of little corner to be articulated. So instead of suppressing multitude, instead of suppressing form, we expressed it. because it came for free as a complication anyway. So when you build things that you have difficulties, sometimes you can use difficulty to make something nice. Not always, but in the best of cases. so the problem. You remember band windows to the street and punched out windows to the courtyard. Two fundamental different understandings of architecture. I mean, really fundamental. So how do you imagine the interior space? Huh? Is it just two planes stupidly glued on the model that when you look in one side, it's different from the other side? We got a headache from this once we had the model. So we decided on the garden facade, we would do the following. We would deconstruct the interior wall, insert a pillar in the wall, insert a lintel here, so that in fact this is not a wall anymore, but this is a composition of different elements. Huh? So you can think of both interior facades as being composed of bands and rectangles. So somehow we felt they can be reconciled. Yeah, Walter Meyer had fun with some Kafka-esque objects in place. And this is the view from the allotment gardens onto the render facade. I was in the building 2 weeks ago because unfortunately we know some of the tenants who live on this floor. And now this is a huge garden on top. Huh? And it seems almost like as if this entire garden down there has moved up to that roof. So this incredible continuity of the idea of this roof garden and with the gardens down there. It's very pleasant. What is the relationship to the street of a building? Is it that when you enter a building, you are leaving behind the roughness of the street, and you're coming in a refined bourgeois setting where everything is expensive and fine? We didn't think we wanted that. Also, we didn't have so much money, but so we decided that we wanted to conceive the entrance and the staircase almost as a continuity of the asphalt of the street. So that we used a rubber floor that we pulled in. So in that rubber floor, white cement kind of terrazzo steps are inserted. The concrete is the worst, the cheapest concrete you can possibly get in Switzerland. So we conscious that terrible concrete, which actually we enjoy, with a very graphic handrail that somehow acts like a visual second plane that comes in front of your eye, and that is somehow changing your perception of what is behind. Huh? Because it's like when you do really nice concrete and everything is minimalist, then you see every spot on the concrete, huh? And you try to clean that spot, and then it's like cleaning forever. So if you work with kind of visual elements that take your attention, that capture your mind, you can have a much more relaxed relationship to things. Now this is the final shot again of the exterior. You see the fiber cement plates. It's concrete, but it's only 15 millimeters thick. It has kind of glass fibers to hold it up, and it's like we designed them in this way. They're like chocolate, I guess. It's not intentional, but we thought of it rather as a kind of modern version of a rustication. A rustication is basically what you saw in the Palazzo Rucellai wall. You saw the precise lining of the stones. So rustication is not a wall composed of big stones, but it's the image, the design, the drawn image of that wall. And that can be fine, it can be rough, it can be tough guy, it can be elegant, you know. So it's the idea that you take the idea of the wall as a language, and not only as a technical way to build a wall. Of course, you need a technical way to build a wall, but it's also to understand it as a language. So we understood this as a kind of modern day rustication. And of course, this has something to do with the idea of armature, of protection against the toughness of the city. I know Zurich is not that tough, but still we have hooligans there. And don't think, you know, that River Plate or Boca Juniors have the exclusive right for hooliganism. We have also some really tough hooligans. And at the same time, we have aluminum windows. We have painted, powder-coated steel doors and elements. So they all come together in a kind of relief that we think is following Le Corbusier's example of a modernism, of a modern architecture that is not the white modernism of the Mediterranean light, you know, shining onto your beautiful building and casting shadows, and you have a glass of wine in the shadow. No, it's the dark kind of modernism of Russia, you know, of constructivism. And it's not, if it was a classical architecture, it would be not Athens, it would be Sparta. So, for you who worked with Michelangelo's example, that in Michelangelo's work, the singularity of every element is really important. And these elements, they really clash. A triangle remains a triangle, a cylinder remains a cylinder, and then it goes bone, bone, bone. And we try to also bring together things in a very autonomous way. So the door is really only the door. The trash can place is only the trash can place. The door for the place for the bicycles is also independent. So we're really interested in the autonomy of every element, and then only in a second step how these elements come together. Because we believe that you live in a big city, and in this big city there's such a variety of lifestyles and understandings on people and so on. But because you live in this big city as citizens, you have developed the ability to see them as one, to understand who they are, and to see the connections between them, and to understand the incredible complexity of this image that you see every day. And I'm like, why can't architecture be like this? If you're so competent visually and intellectually as citizens of this big city, the architecture should be as demanding and as rich, and as vigorating and as close to life. Why not? And the next project I want to show is a project that was recently completed at the beginning of the year. It's quite fresh, and it's in Zug. It's in a village about 10 minutes by suburban train. No, 15 minutes suburban train outside of Zurich. You just go, behind the next hill. But Zurich is very small. It has the center of the city has barely 400,000 inhabitants, and so when you go over the next hill, you're already surrounded by cows, no? But yet you have a suburban train, and it's the fastest growing community in Switzerland. They have the biggest prison of Zurich, and they have an old industrial site that they're now transforming into a mixed-use place of apartments, working, and living. And that's a very interesting urban plan that was done for a developer by the architect Peter Merkel, an architect from Zurich who I had the chance to teach with as a young architect. And he, instead of suggesting a tabula rasa plan, which means that you take down all the buildings of an industrial site and you rebuild them in a completely new manner, but he was rather suggesting a way where you see the existing very heterogeneous structure as a puzzle on which to build. In a puzzle piece where you can take one piece out and you replace one piece with another thing, but then you can take another piece out and you replace it again with another thing. So while you replace most pieces, the structure, the underlying order somehow remains similar. So you're working with the traces of what is there. So it's very interesting. The plan is really mixed, courtyard building, slab building, one tower, another tower. The towers have a diagonal relationship across this big plaza. There are two pavilions here, one cafe, one kind of service pavilion, then a kindergarten, a living slab, and another commercial use building, and an existing school. Everything was decided, big architects, big buildings. All that was left was this little site. And this is a small, slim volume that was intended as an experimental building for housing by the client. They had an investment vessel where they wanted to experiment with really cheap buildings, but the reality of it was that it was a sound barrier. This building against the train, the sound from the train for the luxury apartments in the tower. So it was partially altruistic and partially market-driven. So there was an open call. There was a call for a competition that you could apply for, which was themed under the idea of sufficiency. And I don't know whether you have heard of sufficiency. Sufficiency is a sub-principle of sustainability, which means, sufficiency, the word suficiente, I think, is Spanish, it's that word. Suficiente is inside this word. So it's an idea of ecological thinking that you use only the resources that you actually need. And you're not maximizing the needed resources every time. So they left it completely open what this sufficiency means, but they said they wanted small apartments for 1 or 2 people. So we came up with this step building, and I'm telling you in a minute how we came about this. You can see the context of this building is that there's this community pavilion in front by the Russian artist Brodsky, with a small kind of outside cinema on top of the roof. And then there's the beautiful wooden tower by the excellent architect Roger Bolzhauser, a colleague from Zurich. I think it's the tallest residential wooden tower in Switzerland, being built now. But why the steps? The building law gave us a certain volume that we could build. But when you want to build a really cheap, I'm not sure about Argentina, but if you want to build a really cheap building in Europe, in Central Europe, you build a building with outside corridors that are like, where you have maybe just one staircase, and then you have outside corridor, and you lead from the outside corridor into all the apartments from outside. So, because then you have not such an envelope, and you have few staircases. But the problem was, the building law said, okay, you can build this, but the red zone counts to the square footage. So it counts to the volume you're allowed to build. So actually, you're losing so much. The entire red zone are lost to the rent of the building, or to the surface of the building. So what can you do? You can leave out every second balcony and say you're doing duplex apartments. So then the law that applies that under this, everything that's behind this angle counts, it's almost eliminated. So that's what we did in the first place. But then we realized, okay, see this line here? The high-rise of Roger Bolzhauser is really, really close. So what do? We step it back. And that allows us also to make balconies, add balconies together with these steps and make them much deeper. So we could combine access and outside space on the calm side, protected from the noise of the train. So the result of this is really apartments in different sizes, like a shirt or a t-shirt. You get it in different sizes, S, M, L, XL. The apartments are really the same. You can see that they consist of a circular staircase, or they're duplex apartments, and they're just the depth is different, because they can become slimmer the more you go to the top. So it's a very simple plan. You can see that there's a main staircase up there, there's an egress staircase down there, and then they're just apartments on all floors, and they become thinner and thinner from the left to the right. So the idea of these apartments was to, they didn't really say what kind of apartments they wanted in the competition. They just said for 1 or 2 people. So we thought, if it's only 1 or 2 people, if it's only 1 or 2 and we have 2-story apartments, we don't need walls, right? We don't need privacy, because if I'm kind of fighting with my partner or not, getting along for one night, then I can go upstairs and she's downstairs, or the opposite. And so that should work, we thought. So the life is a life of fewer objects. That's why we are showing this image, this iconic image of the Mobili Grigi, the Muebles Grijos from Ettore Sozzas from 1970, where everything is allocated to one thing in life. So a quick walk through the apartments. The apartments are organized in a very simple way. This is the lower level and the upper level. There's a big void, and we create a kind of L-shaped floor plan. There's a big staircase in this void. It's a metal industrial staircase. It's so big, it's 1.10 meters wide. So you can also put when you're a wheelchair person, or you can walk properly, you can put in an elevator on this staircase. So it's according to law. And you have everything is organized through the position of that staircase. It basically segments the space in 3 spaces. You have a cooking, eating area, a living area, and then under the big staircase you have another living area, and you have the minimal kind of bathroom that has an access directly to the outside with natural light, and a small kitchen. On the upper floor it's also L-shaped, and you can, while you have no walls, you can organize, this L-shape organizes itself very well in different zones that are facing different sides. And it becomes, the smaller the plan becomes, the more dense it becomes, the zones are slightly changing. There are still 3 zones. On the lower level, the 2 living areas become more equal in size, and the more you move up, it becomes smaller. Suddenly you have almost only 1 space with a little bit of extra space above, and also it seems like this staircase becomes bigger and bigger, and once you're up there, you have 40 square meters left on 2 levels, where you have a gigantic staircase and a small room. Fantastic. So it's really like stacking row houses on top of each other with a personal entrance. The lift is big enough so you can bring your bicycle on this level, and so you have a private entrance here. And up there you have your private bedroom, so it doesn't matter when the neighbors walk past your door, because anyway you're sleeping upstairs, probably. So in the competition, every element was thought of as being the cheapest possible. We worked in the competition. I forgot to mention that the competition was not a normal competition. But you had to team up with the contractor, with the builder, and you had to develop the building together with the builder, and the builder had to give a fixed price for the building with the competition. So we teamed up with a conventional, traditional builder who could work with all the materials, and he didn't really care. He was not one of these high-end wood constructors or so on. So we were quite pragmatic, and we tried to find for every element the cheapest possible, the most pragmatic one. But in the end, it was, you can imagine, when you try to do the cheapest one and you look at every element and you analyze every element, it's not it's not easy. it becomes like basically like planning a Formula One car, you know, where every element is developed and put on weight and really maximized in its effect. So here, during the competition, it was non-load bearing wooden walls, prefab pillars, industrial staircase, and so on. Every kind of a hodgepodge of materials. So the facades were quite challenging because this was the smallest building on the site. So we had this kind of I'm tall, but this movie with Danny DeVito and Arnold Schwarzenegger of the 80s. Okay, and so the Danny DeVito really has to be very assertive, because Arnie is so big, and he's so short. Huh? So we are Danny DeVito, and so we said this is an 8-story building, but we did this thing that we connected the different windows into one large window in every unit, so it becomes what we call a colossal order. The colossal order in architecture is when you look at the facade and you don't read every story as a singular one, but the architecture somehow unifies stories, more than one story, into one figure. Huh? So it's monumentalizing a figure. That's what we try to do, to make it look more assertive and that it can somehow put up his head against the big guys. While the other side, the garden side, was really should really have something to do with garden, with the scale of the single unit, and with the access route. These are some images of the finished building. The flapping of fiber cement. These are like fiber cement plates, like ondulated things that you see in rural Switzerland often. I think in Argentina, they may also exist, but I saw also the same version in steel plates. No? That it's a rural way of cheap building. So here you're looking into one of the apartment units with the kitchen, the industrial staircase, the view of the outside. And of course, I was mesmerized when I got to see the atelier building by Bonnet here a few days ago, where the double height, very small atelier units, these wonderful units have these incredible qualities that were answers to some of the similar questions that we ask ourselves. The staircase, the letterboxes. In the architecture of the facade, we're really interested in that kind of ambiguity between the closed form of the building and the layeredness, and we really like to speak about the fact that the building is not a massive monolithic building, that the layers are actually not just accepted as a way of building because we need so much insulation in Switzerland. So it's layers upon layers upon layers how we build. There's no way around it. So rather than suppressing this fact and trying to somehow hide the joints and make everything look as if it was massive and 100 years old, we are exposing and exaggerating almost the effect of the layering by also creating these flaps, making greater joints, allowing for the play of light that runs over these surfaces. The next project is one I've never shown. We've never shown ever. It's only about to be completed. It's an architecture without people, no people. It's a hydro. How do you say a hydroelectric power station? No, it's probably not the right word. It works like this. It's they take. You see, this is the Lake of Zug. It's a lake about half an hour outside of Zurich, very deep lake. From the depth of the lake, they take water, extract water, and use the temperature differences in this water to run heat pumps and to generate heat and cold. And they distribute that heat and cold over the entire city in a system of tubes. So they have these 5 substations distributed over the city, and a new substation was erected in a landscape setting, and so the municipality asked for a competition for the facade of that substation. So we were dealing only with the facade. And you can see that, and Zug is kind of the Silicon Valley of Switzerland. There are many tech firms. You can see this is the structure of the city. It's going to the lake, a small historic center, and then you have the open floodplain that's kind of agricultural land, and our site is here at the edge of the agricultural land. So there's an existing other power station, and this center, the volume was given. It had to be modular and to be extended. So we knew the volume, what it looked like. You can see all the machinery inside. So the principle of as I said, the principle of this power station is that you take the water from the lake, you generate heat and cold, which you serve for the houses and for the offices and kind of companies in the city, and you leave the water goes back to the lake, and it's quite a sustainable, circular idea of the use of energies. So we thought, why aren't we repeating that circular idea of the water in another way? So why don't we take the rainwater that lands on the roof, lead it down the facade, and something should happen to the facade through the water, and then the water flows back into the landscape and into the lake. So what we had as an inspiration, maybe you recognize this, it's the Merit-Oppenheim fountain. And here you see not a pair of cousins and friends, but you see 2 stages of the fountain. The one in 1983, when it was built as a kind of, in the spirit of a kind of fun community fountain where children could play, a kind of left-leaning, meeting place. And but what happened over the time is that they didn't know that the water that was running down, it was full of chalk. So it became a kind of stalactite, like a cave thing, and it's kind of outdoor cave. And on the cave, suddenly, like the trees and like bushes were starting to grow. So now it became this unintended ecological wonder in the middle of the Swiss capital. So we thought, why don't we do the same? Why don't we say, okay, we are doing the flaps, the same flaps that you saw before, but we are doing them in the wrong way. So they're pointing upwards. So lots of dirt will be kind of connected in these things. Always, there's always dust and dirt everywhere. So in the dust and dirt, we will have, some herbs growing and some greenery, and suddenly a tree, and suddenly this will appear like an artificial rock in the Swiss mountains, and you would have nice, it would renaturalize in a way over time. But then, we won the competition. The client said, we are a very serious client, we're a very serious company. We are a reliable partner who provide energy to the community. We want to be not out of control. It's bad for our image. So please, get it under control. He said, okay. But what was with us in the thinking, you saw the form, is really the question of how does architectural form and nature, how do they relate? No? On one side, we have seen, we can see the literal relationship of plants and architecture, of integrating plants and greenery into the architecture of our buildings, of blurring the separation between the two. And on the other hand, geometric form for a long time was also seen as part of nature. Huh? The precision of geometric form was not seen. Now we tend to see geometry as something artificial. For a long time, people saw it as part of nature. So is it a possibility that we look at this wonderful photograph by the German photographer Karl Bloßfeld, who took photographs of plants and flowers like scientific objects, like in an objective way? No? Is it possible to restitch the relationship between natural form and architectural form through geometry? Maybe that's possible. So this is the model, the working model of the power station without plants. Still, this is the competition model, 1:50, and it shows, like the flower, a gesture of openness to the sky, a fragility, a kind of feathered skin, a connection to the ground, a kind of like an open gesture. The flaps that are pointing in the wrong direction. And the plan of so when we came back from the first meeting of the client with our landscape architect, we said, okay, we have to get that really, we have to get it under control. So the landscape architect, together with an expert, developed with us a system where the water actually flows from one level to the next, and you have planters on every level that are hidden in these joints, and on every side, the planting program is completely different. Because like in a rock, when you're in the mountains, when you have an east-facing side or west-facing side or north-facing side, different plants will grow there. Because you have shade or sun, different temperatures will arise. So that is these conditions of nature are replicated in this building. So this is some images of the finished building. You can see here the first plants growing. We put really trees there, The client doesn't know. and we had a terrible summer with lots of rain. So they are growing like anything, and I'm looking forward. Next year they will growing like hairs out of the nose and the ears of old people, And then it will be really great, They don't know what they're getting. I hope they will never see this lecture online. So the idea is also to have a tectonic that allows for the movement of not the real movement, but the kind of virtual movement of these elements. So there's an entrance here. So we move these plates up, we cut them. So there is a tectonic that allows for many things to happen. And that's so interesting. Today there was one conversation that we had with you. Oh yeah, it was the Plaza building when a student asked the authors of the project, what do these bubbles really mean? What happened? No, it was not. No, it was actually it was La Salle Hotel, extension. What really happens in that thing that's sticking out? And the answer of the student was so sensible and so interesting and so good that it was said that one doesn't know really yet. It could be something, and we're looking forward to understanding what it could be. And in this project, we are also really looking forward to understanding what this really means, what we have been doing. We know what it objectively means. We know that there will be plants. We know the forms. We have designed them. They have been built according to our plans. But what is it really that we have done? We don't know yet. And we are really looking forward to finding that out. So. See there, they're just daring to look over the fence, no? They're coming. Be sure they're coming. See? The last project I want to talk about is a new building for the residence of the Swiss ambassador in Algeria. It is a competition that we won almost 7 years ago, and that was only completed at the beginning of this year. Quite a fabulous adventure. It was a competition where we entered without having the possibility to travel to Algeria. What an interesting problem, you know? You're designing a building for a place that you don't know. You have photographs, you have an idea. Algeria is a North African country facing the Mediterranean. It has mountains, it has a Mediterranean coastline, it has huge areas of desert. It's the biggest country in Africa. It has a culture that's hybrid. It is Arab, it's Berber, it has a long history of French colonialism. It's French speaking, it's Berber speaking, it's Arab speaking. It has a fractured history of between an orientation towards the West and the search for their own identity. So we knew that we were doing something. How to start? It was a perfect example of a project where you're operating with form on a hypothesis, like you did in these days, and you will find out what this is when you build it. In this case, we found out. And we're showing this image here because in the course, between the fact that we won the competition and the realization, there were huge upheavals in Algeria. There were demonstrations against the oppression of the government. There was a hope for a better future. Then came COVID, then the suppression of the same movements, the social movements, and now an uncertain future for the country. So we find ourselves in a context of a building that is operating in that context. And I'm not just talking about the uncertainty of building a building. in an unstable context, but also the uncertainty of understanding what that building means, what it contributes. And I'd like to talk a little bit about that. The setting is beautiful. It's an enclosed, beautiful garden overlooking the harbor of Algiers in a green area. It's a historic garden from the 40s that used to be owned by the director of the botanical garden. So nice plants, of course. And there's an existing building by the French architect Baccarat that was built 10 years ago. It's the chancellery, which means that it's where the offices is. When you want to renew your passport, you go there, or when you want to get a visa, you go there. And then our job was, of course, the nicest one. It was to design the residence here of the ambassador. So the old residence had damage from earthquakes. Algeria is on the Eurasian fault. It's one of the most earthquake-prone areas in the world. So there are cracks everywhere, and they made an investigation how to repair the existing villa. There was no way you could do it, so they tore it down, and we replaced it with a new building. So the interesting thing was the Swiss. It's a small country, no? So of course a small country also has a small embassy, no? And so the embassy was just an apartment of 160 square meters, a few official rooms and so on. So we thought it would be terrible in this beautiful garden to separate the apartment of the ambassador from the official rooms. Usually, the official rooms are on the ground floor next to the garden, and then for security reason, the ambassador lives on the first floor in a normal apartment. So we said, let's not do that. Let's put everything on the ground floor, because the garden is big enough. And the other idea, of course, was if you don't have so much space, you may as well use all the spaces for all the functions. You could open the doors between the different parts. And you know, today when you go to an embassy, I'm sure you went to an embassy for some visa stuff or whatever, you usually have the private quarters of the ambassador hidden somewhere away, and the official parts are like separated. But in former times, like 200 years ago, the embassy of a country was really the house of the ambassador. It was really that private home where he or she would receive the guests, the state guests, and be the host. So what we did is we combined all the functions. We said the private residence of the ambassadors down here, it's wrapping around this courtyard. The official reception rooms, the dining room, and the sitting room is here with the entrance, the official entrance from the top, and there's a service area with kitchen and toilets. The entrance of the ambassadors from that side, the private entrance from the ambassadors from this side, there's a car park for his cars, and the official entrance is from there. And there's a huge loggia that unifies these two and leads into the garden. But as you can see in this plan, all the different functions are separated and opened with doors. So in the end, during the day, you can keep all the doors open and still walk through. So the idea of that ambiguity that I showed in the first project in the Herrenstraße, between what happens when the doors are open versus what happens when the doors are closed, is really very present here also, only that the plan works in a different way. As you can see, the plan is really confusing mix of different forms. You know, a few cellular things here, a triangle, then a straight line, you know, enfilade, a corridor, a hodgepodge of things, you know. So, and at the same time, it's a continuity. So we thought really of that beautiful painting of Picasso that hangs in the Basel Kunstmuseum, which is called El Aficionado El Torero from 1912, which has pretty much the same effect we find like the plan when you look at the plan. Look, when you try to look at this painting, El Torero. What happens? Your eye is part of the early Cubist period of Picasso, of course. Your eye is wandering around. Your eye will catch certain things. Maybe your eye will see a mustache or a hat somewhere, and then you try to focus and you leave that again. You lose it, because it's not really a mustache. Then you go down and maybe you see a newspaper or a mandolin or a guitar, but then you lose it again. So there's constant search and constant kind of instability between discovering something and losing it again in a kind of flow of the painting. So this is where you arrive. So this was really the idea of this plan, to have this ambiguity between a wholeness and the character of very distinct parts. So when you design a one-story pavilion, and you are in trouble, okay? Because the thing that is hanging over your head as an architect, I believe, is that wonderful, terrible, dominant prototype of Mies van der Rohe's Barcelona pavilion. That model with a beautiful, like floating roof on these slender, reflecting pillars, with a kind of with glass pane sliding under it and meeting kind of beautiful, reflective stone walls. That model is like it's like a planet, a sun with a huge gravitational field that is sucking in all the little planets around it, that go past. So this was the enemy. This is if you think in Freudian terms, we had to get rid of that stuff, So what you have to get rid of is, of course, that beautiful floating plane, So we thought, how can we kill that beautiful floating plane? And we can only kill it if we cover it up with walls and canopies and all kinds of stuff, and make it really disappear. So you can only see that planes in small instances, maybe at the corners. There is something left. Otherwise, it's all about canopy and the equivalence of walls and so on. So we fought for this, to get rid of this. And at the same time, while doing this fight, we discovered that we could find and develop the same formal multitude that we saw in the plan, that we developed in the plan, also for the expression of the building. And Switzerland has a motto which is called unity in diversity. Or is it the other way around? Anyway, unity in diversity. It's a small country with 8 million people, 4 official languages, like 24 cantons, different laws, different cultures, and still it's considers itself a country of will, because everybody has the will to be together. So it's touching. If you see this as a symbolic gesture, this embassy, the embassy as a kind of message to a foreign country, it's the idea that the independence of the parts, the autonomy of each architectural element is not in contradiction to the unity of the building, but it's actually a precondition. Independence, autonomy is a precondition for unity. And it's basically, if you think about society, if you can think of two understandings of society. One is the traditional national state, where you say, I have to suppress the individual and put them all in one line in order to create unity. The other is the idea of the pluralistic society, where each voice is being heard, and only once the voice is established and can be heard, they can actually create relationships. And that is the idea. This is the competition model, which shows the large loggia and the official entrance, and the beautiful roof terrace that goes separate in 3 parts with a garden, the roof terrace showing official roof terrace looking towards the harbor, and the private roof terrace for sunbathing. These are some pictures of the finished project that we are very happy with. Again, the entrance, the official entrance, we have created these colorful reliefs that are leading in the depth of the building. They're kind of knockoffs of Solovit's work. In the competition, there were very literal, kind of almost copies of it. And when we tried to develop them further, we felt that we can only stick with the copy because we have no better ideas. And so it's actually a concrete building, because concrete is the material you can use very well in Algeria, but the thinness of the effect of the thinness of the expression of the building is defined by the thin fiber cement plates that are applied onto the concrete. So this is another really interesting lesson for you guys. I mean, also for us, of course, the appearance of the building, its expression is not necessarily based on the way a building is built. If the walls are thick, it doesn't have to be a heavy building. If the walls are thin, it doesn't have to be a light building. It's the eye that defines whether it's a heavy or a light building. And where do you see it? Where do you read the building? Of course, you read it on the edges. No? You read it on the edges, where you read it as something thin or as something thick. For example, when houses have windows that are set deep into the wall, the building appears much more massive and heavy. While when the windows are set outside or almost flush or just slightly receded, the building seems gentle and light. Inside, like diagonal, moving marble floors also underline the flow of space. This is a memory piece we did. We discovered that the Swiss, we thought, what's the relationship between Switzerland and Algeria? We discovered that the Swiss, they helped the Algerians and the French when they were fighting the bloody war of independence to speak to each other for the first time, in secret, in a hotel in Switzerland. And that was the beginning of the peace process that culminated in the Algerian independence from the French rule. So we approached this hotel, and they donated a historic table to us that we split into 2. We cut it into 2, and we put it against the mirror. And it says on the mirror, "Bon début à Lucerne," a good beginning in Lucerne. It's the title of the secret document of the Swiss government that was organizing this meeting, this first meeting. So it's a memory piece to connect the 2 countries. I'm showing you a few interior images. On the interior, on the furniture, the movable furniture, we were working with a Swiss furniture designer Jörg Bohner. Here's some of his leather seats that he designed, not for this project, but before. This is the view into the kitchen, into the private kitchen. This is a view from the garden into the loggia and the main reception spaces that have some of the same ornamental backdrops. These ornamental backdrops in orange are really about the effect of depth. Because they are so deep, the spaces are deep, we wanted to bring the spaces to the front and create an element where you don't know how far they actually are. This is the staircase leading up to the roof terrace. The roof terrace with a view of the old city. And when, at the beginning of this presentation on Algiers, I said I wanted to speculate about the meaning of architecture that is uncertain, and how you find meaning, and sometimes you only find meaning once you build it. When we traveled to Algeria for the first time after winning the competition, we met our future partner architect, he's probably one of the best architects of the country, with whom later we built the building with his help. And we presented the project to him pretty much the same way like I presented to you now. And through this friendship that was formed with him, he began to identify with this project and said at the end of the meeting, "C'est du jazz, quoi. This project is like jazz." Huh? And what he felt was really incredibly rich for us, because he later explained to us that he is, like many Algerians, in this freedom struggle. They are caught between two poles. They're caught between an Islamist movement that want to take away their rights, take away the rights of the women, in the name of a new religious rule on one side, and on the other side, a kind of classical dictatorship where the military is very strong, that want to take their civil rights. So he, as an architect, he saw as his mission, or he still sees as his mission, the establishment of a free and equal public space. A public space that is expressing the diversity of the country and allowing the diversity to flourish. And he recognized himself in a wonderful gesture in this building. So while we know that this building is not publicly accessible because it's an embassy, we hope that the language of this building somehow informs that new quest for freedom and for an emancipation of a new Algeria. So it is the meaning that comes after the form, as so often. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Thomas, for the, we can do one at least for background now. Thank you so much, Thomas, for the wonderful lecture. It's been an amazing week with you and Jacob and Celine, and to finish this way, it's fantastic. Thank you so much. We have some time for getting a pause for some questions or comments from the audience. I wanted to ask you, I'm amazed by your work. I've been amazed since the first time I saw it, because I think it's so joyful, which is a strange thing to find nowadays. Architecture is about money, it's about austerity, it's about issues with sustainability and problems, and it's a hard thing. And it looks, it always, you're one of the guys that make it look easy, I have this feeling all week, you make it look easy. And I was wondering, you didn't talk so much perhaps today about technical details or technology, the moments where you spoke about technology was as a finish, saying, okay, we do cheap concrete and it looks like this, or we do it in steel and it looks like this, but not so much not facing challenges, with construction, So I wanted to dig a little bit deeper about what's behind this that looks so magical and easy in a way. Like your use of technology or your approach to technique.
Of course, we are super serious about construction, and we practice in a country where there's zero tolerance for any fault or any problem, anything that doesn't work, or anything that leaks. Zero tolerance. It's really terrible, and it's keeping us also back a little bit. But said that, it's the interesting thing is that we discovered, Oliver and I and the team together over the years, that the new way of building is composite with many materials that don't connect properly, with lots of joints, with lots of questions how they connect, and they almost are never allowed to touch, because they move differently under the sun and under rain, or so. That this could be actually seen as a new liberation. That this could be, and that if we conceive buildings from the beginning like open figures through our models, where things are singular and standing next to each other, and where it's not the fact that the materials touch themselves that makes the unity of the building, but it's actually the fact that we put the materials and the elements together with our eyes. Like if, for example, you look at a tree, right? 10,000 leaves, and a trunk, and the leaves are not touching each other really, but you still, they all compose one big volume. So this means that you can actually say that when you build a model that is somehow fragmentary, that you can use that as a starting point for construction. And you know that if the model is fragmentary, it will actually be easier for you to construct it than if it was monolithic. And that's the funny thing, that we've asked the idea that we have this saying in the office that the model is always right. So, which means that when we build this model, and these are really all competition models, all working models, they sit in the office on a table until the building is finished. And when we do details, we take the details like to the model, like if she was the boss, and say, okay, let's compare. Are we still on track? And it was so terrible. You cannot believe. In the case of Algeria, I had some time this summer, and I was so proud to think that I know exactly how the project works. So I built a new model, a bigger model, to be more in control of the details. And everything was wrong. I spent like 6 weeks on this model, and everything was wrong in the end. In the end, I was putting the model on the floor, and I was like working on it and destroy it. And so the information that you are able to store in a model and that you can then extract for real construction, really serious construction, is absolutely astonishing. And I think that's something we learned, that we have time, that we have time to construct it, because architecture is not so fast, right? When we have an idea, we have probably weeks or months to develop it further.
Thank you. I really like your answer, because one of the words you mentioned the most during the lecture was posh posh. Like this mixture, it's always getting back to that. There's a sense that architecture nowadays is also this architecture you can almost see every screw of a building, everything transparent, everything ordered, everything up to the detail. So it's refreshing to see other positions. Podemos hacer preguntas en español también.
still, so it's going to be like vague, but I found it really interesting when you were talking about these projects that have like this time component. Maybe you didn't say it like it's explicitly, but this energy place, I don't know the name, but yes, that involves, well, the intervention of time or the time variable, and as well when you mentioned how the first project you showed had evolved over time. Well, I don't know if evolution is the right word, but had developed over time. And well, now I was thinking like about these movements you did according to the door, like where the doors were meant to be, and that kind of playful approach. And I was thinking about how do you see this relation of space and time, and if you could like go a little bit deeper about it, because I found it like really, really super interesting.
Wow, what an amazing question. I mean, I think this is something we are only starting to explore now. I think this project has opened a new door for our practice. But what you're saying about the virtual movement of elements, where it's a movement that you can call it frozen, or you can call it stopped or implied. I think this is really important. When you think of tectonics, I mean, tectonics is basically the word for how do you put a building together. There are thousands of ways how you put something together. You can brancos, you can stack it, you can cover it, you can line it, you can frame it, or whatever you do. That's all tectonics. When you think about tectonics, then the time of the idea of putting something together implies already time. It's like, when I get dressed in the morning, I come from the shower, I put on my underwear, then I put my shirt and my trousers on. And this construction of my layers is also, it takes time. And this can be read. And you know that if I have 3 coats over the other, that I put on the last coat as the last thing. So this is really interesting, and also movement is part of that. So I think this is a very interesting theme to explore further. Thank you for your comment.
Thank you.
¿Alguna otra pregunta?
Thank you so much for that. I love it. And as you mentioned, you took into consideration the struggle of the people, of the journalists. The question is, did you feel that struggle too while you were working on the project?
Yes. When we were traveling to Algeria, you could feel on the street that everybody would belong to one side of the struggle. Everybody would, the cityscape was in a way divided into different spaces, where you could walk as a woman without a veil in a certain area. You could not in another area. You could do certain things at a certain time of the day in some areas. It is a deep conflict and deep struggle where everything is, including architecture, becomes almost a weapon, more than a symbol. And so the architectural language suddenly became not just, a private choice, like, okay, this is nice, I like this, I don't like this, and this is fine, no problem, I don't have a problem with that. But suddenly architectural language becomes a way of identifying yourself with a certain way of how to see your life. So we had a lot of conversations about that, also with the workers, with the engineers, with the local architect. So it was incredible how relevant our profession can be if it enters such a context.
Hi, I'm an intruder here. I do not come from the architecture world, so there's a risk this question might sound a little bit stupid. But I was very curious about how art plays a role in each of the projects, because you mentioned Picasso, you mentioned Solé, and you see even in the exercises that you suggested for the workshop, art is a very big part of every work. So I was wondering if art is somewhere you go to look for, I don't know, a trigger for ideas like structure, color. Do the references to artworks and artists come prior to the project? Do you find them after you start developing projects? Something about that relationship.
Thank you for that question. I mean, art is definitely very important for us. It's like we think architecture is not art. Art is art. But we think that, I mean, sometimes the references, the inspirations come afterwards, sometimes they come before, sometimes in the process. And we have all cases. But at the end, we think that art is much faster than architecture. That artists somehow can receive certain things, do certain things that we need more time to put in the toilets and all that stuff. It's really slow. So sometimes we look at art that seems to be quite old. I mean, it could be quite old, that art that is almost culturally digested, if you want to say that. So art that is canonized almost. So art that has been around for a long time. And then the art becomes, in our eyes, again, free again, to be used. And in a very opportunistic way. Almost like a thief, So like the Solvit, Solvit is canonized, But we can take Solvit, of course it's not art, we know it's not art, but suddenly what Solvit has achieved with his work, and the power, the energy, the anonymity, the relationship between kind of mathematical repetition and figure, all these funny things, this is great. And this all suddenly can be digested and brought into architecture. So in a way, I mean, I'm not like a big believer in kind of avant-garde ideas, and periodization, but I think it still holds true that if you look at Renaissance painting, then sometimes painters were architects, right? And the same paintings, and the paintings were done 15 years before the building was built. So the sensibility of basically a painting was already in mannerism when the architects were still building high Renaissance buildings. So there's a strange shift between architecture and art. And we could say, okay, we're conservative and we cry and we think it's terrible. Or we can say, okay, guys, go there. We pick up the pieces, on the way, and see what we can use. And this course was also here an encouragement to do that. And we did go a bit further. We brought some more recent art also in this class in the last days, and we were surprised how well they were brought into the realm of architecture. But you don't know. So it's always because why is this happening? The reason why this is happening is when we think that architecture, like any other expressive form, is always struggling against its own hermeticism that you want to break out. And you take whatever helps you to break out of the hermeticism, you should use. It can be music, it can be art, it can be whatever, it can be chocolate, whatever it is. So that's why. Sure. I'm not hungry.
But thirsty for Thank you so much for your lecture. I need to say I feel nervous to speak in English because I'm not allowed it, but I will try to do my best. When I notice your different projects, I see different elements like the using of brilliant colors like green, orange, or different layouts, and these angles in your walls. I think there are elements that in your project there are and in all of. And I'm going to ask you about if you see elements here in Argentina when the time you stay here, if you want to incorporate in the future projects, because I think these elements, the colors and there are lack of here in Argentina, but I think I'm not allowed to see different buildings. But maybe in your time stay here, you see elements from the architecture from here to what to incorporate in your project. So I wanted to know if you like it and you notice something. Thank you.
Wow, what a nice question. I mean, no, I feel absolutely enriched by these days here in Buenos Aires and at the school. I have a set of answers. I got extremely inspired by the voices of the professors of the school. We did some secret research on the internet before we came, but afterwards we were shown some work, we looked at some work. It's really incredible. This is going to be a great source of inspiration. And then also, when you go to a different country and you become free because you know that each architect in a different country works under different circumstances. For example, we went for lunch in the Orno pizzeria that Marcelo designed. It is almost a cage that is emerging from an existing building, and we had discussions about that. How could you do that? And why is this possible? And so on. And then Marcelo said, in our country, the cost of the building is much more important than the cost of the land. I was like, how is this possible? And suddenly you can do something and plan something. And then he said, okay, the cage on top in the cold, beautiful terrace, wonderful terrace room is not counting. It's not a room. So suddenly, in any project, like the rules that we use for the step building, you find new liberties, no? And because every architect here works under the rules of Argentina, Buenos Aires, suddenly you have different freedoms and different problems. No? So to experience these freedoms and problems is such an enriching thing, because sometimes we are stuck in our problems and our freedoms.
Hello. First of all, thank you for that wonderful lecture. I had a question about your project in SWOT. It's the name. I was surprised by the amount of limitations that you mentioned on that project. First of all, the price of the materials that had to be cheap, and also the counted square meters, the size of the stairs, or even the need for these stairs. And I wondered, is it something that kind of interfered with the design process, or was it something that pushed you forward and kind of led you into the final design or the final result, and what didn't it be?
Oh, that's a great question. Absolutely, the second one. It was a really fascinating design process, and as I mentioned, we teamed up with a contractor, so a company. So for 10 times they came to our office, and every time we would discuss the cost and the construction of every element. And they at the end of the meeting, they were scratching their heads, and they went home to calculate, and they came back. So it was every element was changing all the time, at least 3 times. But what was the stable element was the step, because the step had something to do with the law, and we understood that, and we were the only one who find that little hole in the possibilities of the law. It was it's wonderful when you have limitations. Of course, you also need some freedom, but limitations can really drive a project. And if you have only limitations and nobody gives you anything, then it's also bad, I know. But a good mixture of very clear limitations that you accept and a bit of freedom is best.
Well, Thomas, thank you for all your answers and for your wonderful lecture. Let's go have a toast.